fellow Falcoholics. What is up? Welcome to episode 264 of the Falcoholic Live. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, at Falcoholic Kevin, joined by two fantastic guests this evening. First of all, we have with us Will McFadden, at Will McFadden, host of our sister show on the Bleav podcast network, Bleav in Falcons, and a fellow writer, contributor extraordinaire over at thefalcoholic.com. Will, it's been a minute since we've had you on. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it's crazy because I told you I was planning on reaching out to you this week, and you reached out to me, and it was one of these where it was like, it's probably about time for us to just come together, hash out the whole Arthur Smith, like the direction of the franchise, what's going on with the team. So it was serendipitous, and I'm really excited for this conversation. So thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, no, it's like, I feel like in the off season, it was just like, maybe we should like not, because I feel like we were just having each other on like every week, because it's the off season, everyone's taking a break, and now it's like, the season's here, okay, we can do it, and it's like, oh, it's been like months, so definitely well overdue. And speaking of overdue, also Dave Choate joining us tonight, guys, at the Falcoholic himself. Dave, how are you doing this fine evening?
Like we were saying before the show, aside from computer stuff and the Falcons, I'm great. Those are the two things.
All right. Yes. Well, those are two things that computer stuff, maybe I can help a little bit with. The Falcons, I can't. You guys know if I had power over the Falcons, then they'd probably have won multiple Super Bowls by now. But unfortunately, none of us seem to have any influence whatsoever on whether the Falcons are good or not. So, we're just going to continue to do our best here discussing this flawed team. At least earlier in the season, I think they were lovably flawed. Since then, decidedly less lovable. But, they're still our Falcons, and we're going to try to inject some optimism, because I think coming into this show, Jordan Watkins, my co-host for Trench Talk, very down on the whole situation and that conversation yesterday. If you want the pessimism, go listen to that show, because that was much darker look at things. I think tonight we're going to get a little, maybe give optimism a chance, not saying that this is going to happen or that we even believe that it will happen, but we're going to at least talk through what an optimistic outlook for the rest of this season might look like. And, we'll get sort of our takes on what we actually think will happen too. And so there will probably be some pessimism from me in there. But, we'll give it a chance. We'll give hope a chance, right, on tonight's show. And before we dive in, real quick, I want to bring you a word from our sponsor, of course, betonline.ag. Folks, the last of the major pro sports leagues is off and rolling, and college basketball is ready to go as well. betonline.ag remains your top spot for all your live betting action and contests. You can get the NFL, college football, UFC, and NHL. All those are in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for your wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions. You can get all the hoops betting that you're looking for, along with the NFL through the Super Bowl and college football through the college football playoff, available at your fingertips with both desktop and now mobile access at any time. So what are you waiting for, folks? Head to the website betonline.ag today, and remember to use our promo code Bleav. That's BLEAV for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts. All right. So we got two great guests, and we got a lot to cover because I haven't spoken to either of you guys in a long time. Will was technically the first to RSVP, so Will get the first crack here. That's how we have to do it, to be totally fair, But
I love it.
I'm just sort of curious, Will, what your takeaway on how the season as a whole has gone. Obviously, it's not what we expected, but how are you feeling now heading into the bye at 4-6? Are you devastated? Are you like sort of irked? Like where do you land at this point in the season?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely could fairly be criticized as probably looking on the bright side a little bit too much, but it's frankly, I'm not trying to look on any side, really. I'm just trying to understand what is going on, and at least the approach that you hear Arthur Smith say that he wants to follow, like it makes sense from a kind of a sound football standpoint. You can look at the fact that they're in all of these games. Like, there are real things that I think if you look at the last regime, and I was in the building for that downfall, and the problems were different problems. And to me, they were much harder problems to fix under DQ at the end there. So that is why I think I'm a little reticent to just be like, eject Arthur Smith into the sun because I think that these are the types of problems where you can roll up your sleeves and you can kind of get under the hood and you can fix it a little bit. But that being said, like when you lose 3 games in a row and you've lost, the last 2 games against teams that I don't really care what all the circumstances were, or, Josh Dobbs turning into Jeremy Lin over the last couple of weeks, or Kyler Murray coming back, like you need to win those last 2 games. And so when you're now on a 3-game losing streak going into the bye week, you have had to bench your quarterback who you all offseason stood behind, said that we believe this person can, maybe he's not the franchise quarterback, but we've seen enough from him. We believe the upside is there enough that over the course of the season, if the growth happens, like we think there's a reasonable chance that he can get you to the playoffs. So I was kind of buying into a lot of that stuff, but like I said, a 3-game losing streak. And now I start to sit here and wonder, okay, it is fair to look at Arthur Smith and say, it's all well and good that you've been saying we need the bye week to get stuff corrected. We need to kind of figure this out, retool some things, make some adjustments, but we'll get it fixed. When you've been saying we'll get it fixed after pretty much every loss this season, and the same kind of, it's just the commonality is the befuddlement in which you're losing the games. There is no real through line outside of the turnovers there, but it's just, all right, well, you keep losing. That's the commonality. And so it becomes harder to say Arthur Smith is now 100% in my mind the right man given the week off to make those corrections. That's kind of where I am with all of it. I still have hope, like I said before, because of the ways in which the Falcons are in these games. They lost these last 2 games because of really poor tackling in the pocket against quarterbacks who have way more athleticism than we expected them. Josh Dobbs, definitely, Kyler Murray, we knew that, but like they were right there. They had those wins, and I feel like we'd be singing a different tune if like 2 tackles get made. So I just try to balance all of that, even though I think it's totally fair to say fire them off into the sun, right? Like, because you lose 3 games and that's life in the NFL.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really quite hilarious to me that they lost the games the exact same way. Literally the exact same thing happened on both of those plays.
I felt like that was going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
All Sunday morning. Mm-hmm. I'm sure everybody had the same feeling at some point where they were like, Kyler Murray is also pretty athletic. I really hope that they figured out the problems they had against Josh Dobbs, because I could see a scenario in a late game situation. Like I played the whole scenario out in my head at brunch on Sunday morning, and then it happened. Like that's really bad.
It is. It was crushing. Obviously it pissed a lot of people off, myself included. And the reason you guys come to us is because after the game, we're as pissed off as you are. And then you come back to us because after a few days, we tend to have more reasonable takes, so you can get a little bit of tempered energy in there. But yeah, very frustrating end of that game for sure. And Dave, I wanted to get your thoughts on sort of how things have played out and of course the end to that game as well.
Yeah, for me, it is hugely disappointing, right? And the reason for that is, go back to the end of last year. We're looking at a team, they finished 7-10 again, but you were like, they're going to spend a lot of money. This is the 3rd year for this coaching staff. I know Ryan Nielsen's new, but the problems that have existed here, what they are, what you have to do to fix them, where you need to go. And after the offseason that they had, after the expenditures, after the draft capital, after, again, lessons learned and so forth that should have been learned, this team is kind of still losing games the same way. They're struggling with the same problems that they had a year ago and even sometimes in 2021. So to be sitting here at 4-6, like I know, that they're really only like a game out. If they beat the Saints, all of a sudden everything flips again and they have a shot. But the way that the season has unfolded, the way that so many of their bets have not worked out the way they expected them to, it has been really disappointing. And I think it really does cast a lot of doubt on how this whole thing has been built, which is not where I wanted to be, thinking like that, because again, with the money that they spent, with the draft capital, with the building that they've been doing, there was a vision here that was supposed to happen, and it hasn't come close to coming together, especially on offense, which has been a huge disappointment for me. So, seeing the end of that Cardinals game, I think we all saw it coming. Like you guys said, The scramble, even the deep ball there, like as soon as it left Kyler Murray's hands, I was like, that's a completion. Like you just knew, it didn't matter who he was throwing it to, where it was going, it was going to happen. And to me, that's really the most defining, disappointing thing about this Falcon season is they are still the Falcons. They are the Falcons in the most classic fall apart at the wrong time ways. And yes, it's a different team, different coaching staff, different set of problems overall, but you can count on them to do that really stupid thing right at the end of the game. So, they have to come out of the bye looking like a totally different team, which is, again, if you had asked me at the end of the summer where we were going to be, we all had our season record predictions. We all had thoughts on how this was going to go. I think I was pretty downbeat on the pass rush. I was more measured with Ritter. And still, my expectations have been obliterated. So yeah, I'm not super pumped. Yeah.
No, and I think like a big part of it is that they're losing, right? And you could talk about like, oh, what if and not calling out Joe Schmo in the chat here. Joe's been another long suffering enjoyer of this team, who he's been one of the guys I would say that's been the most critical of Smith's play calling in particular. Even going back to last year and saying, don't think what would it change if we won these last two games by a point or something? We'd still have the same problems. And I think that's a good point intellectually to think about, but it's human nature, right? You're winning, everything's fine. You're losing, everything sucks. And like, would the problems be that different if they had made those 2 sacks? No, not really. I mean, they would be a little less magnified, and obviously they'd have 2 more wins, which in the NFL, ultimately, if you have wins, it covers up a lot of bad stuff. But to me, it's a multifaceted problem because I agree with Joe's take and the takes of a lot of sort of analysts. JT O'Sullivan with the quarterback school, I think, has done great work evaluating it. We saw Kurt Warner infamously also put his hat in the ring there, and it sparked a little bit of ire from Arthur Smith. And I think there are some fundamental issues with the passing game that really it hasn't evolved at all in Arthur Smith's time here or really since Tennessee. And I think that's one of the big red flags to me is that you have to be able to adapt in the NFL because teams will sit on your tendencies. I think
we were starting to see some evolution though under Ritter. It's just that the turnovers became such a glare. It's like it blocked out that growth because the turnovers were such an issue. But to me, that was so starkly apparent in this Cardinals game. They didn't trust Taylor Heineke. Like no. They did not have a game plan that called for him to throw the ball down the field at all. And then when Desmond Ritter did come in the game, you saw, I believe Taylor Heineke's average depth of target was like 4.4 yards. And then Desmond Ritter's was like 12.7. Now, obviously, fourth quarter, they were trailing when Ritter came in, but that it's bigger than just that, right? That is, they have opened up the offense, or at least were opening up the offense, I think, under Desmond Ritter in a way that you're right. They definitely did not under Marcus Mariota. And I don't think they really felt comfortable with Taylor Heineke, being in a position where he could turn the ball over and cost them that game. But I do think they are more willing to kind of believe that Desmond Ritter can rein this in and that they felt like they can open up the offense or at least find a little bit more balance with Desmond Ritter behind center. So that's just to push back a little bit on that, Kevin, because I think we were starting to see the signs of growth in the passing game and see that become a little bit more true to the 50-50 balanced vision of the run and the pass game that Arthur Smith wants. But again, like I think it's fair to take everything that he envisions and the plan for this offense with a little bit of a grain of salt, given everything we've seen so far.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another aspect of this that is just very puzzling is the whole quarterback situation because, people go all the way back to 2021 and criticize, the decision to pass on Justin Fields or not to go after a quarterback that draft. And we're not going to rehash that. You guys know my thoughts. I was team Justin Fields, but I was pretty happy with Kyle Pitts because Kyle Pitts is a great prospect, a great player, I think. Now, Kyle Pitts' usage is another thing entirely, and that's another, sort of sticking point with this coaching staff and sort of their failure to be able to create a role for Kyle Pitts that's really emphasized his strengths, especially this year when he's clearly still recovering from injury, and he's not the one-of-one athlete that he was in years prior. So you kind of have to utilize him a little bit differently. But yeah, I mean, and this is, I'll bring Dave in on this too. The decision to go away from Ritter so soon, I mean, I think it shocked everyone. And I think there wasn't a lot of pushback to it for the reasons that you mentioned, Will, which was like he was turning the ball over at an insane rate. Like that. Now, that being said, he was actually passing the ball pretty well when he wasn't throwing interceptions, which he really hadn't done a lot of in the last several weeks. It was mostly the fumbles. He was throwing the ball pretty well. They were getting the passing game going, like you said. And then it seemed like there was no leash. Like he fumbled that ball, and then he went in for concussion testing, and Arthur Smith was like, "All right, we're putting Heineke in." And that was. It was jarring to me at the time, but I felt
like they could use the cover of the concussion a little bit. Like it gave them a little bit of a window there. And honestly, I kind of felt like they said, hey, we can beat the Vikings and we can beat the Cardinals as long as we don't beat ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I think, especially in the Cardinals game, they were a little timid, and you could feel that because I think they were so afraid to lose that game themselves that then they went out and lost that game by not playing to really win. That's just kind of what it seemed like to me, especially with the offensive game plan. But look, I'm seeing the chat too. Like the pass concepts have never been my favorite with Arthur Smith. It is a lot of these kind of double posts, these high lows, a lot of just like stick routes that end up not moving anywhere on 3rd and 6. And you got 4 guys running like 5 yards and turning around. What do you do after that? So trust me, like it's not a beautiful dance of like run and pass married together. I totally get that. I just think it felt like they were trusting Desmond Ritter to unlock at least a little bit more of that playbook. And that's something different than what I've seen with any other quarterback under Arthur Smith, not named Matt Ryan.
Yeah, I agree there. And Dave, I'll bring you in on this. What were your thoughts sort of about the decision to go to Heineke? Was that jarring to you? And what do you think about the sort of state of the passing game as a whole at this point?
Yeah, I don't think, I've written about this quite a bit over the last couple of weeks. With Heineke, to me, you were saying he gave you that good second half. Ritter really had looked bad that first half. You had the cover with the injury. As weirdly as Arthur Smith has handled this whole situation, maybe there's something going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. He could not have made it seem more like cloak and dagger than he did. I think that's just his style ultimately, but it kind of, made everything weird. But I do think that the decision was defensible at the time because, again, Ritter was turning the ball over at such a clip that you really had to, maybe take that step back. And I understand, you felt like you had to win the Vikings and Cardinals games, so you were going to let Heineke do it. I think what I didn't necessarily understand is after the Vikings game, sticking with him, especially in light of what we saw from the Cardinals game plan, which Will alluded to, which is Heineke was not going to throw an interception down the field. Like they were not going to let him do it. And if that is something that you don't trust your veteran guy that you brought in to win the game not to do, then we have a big problem. And I think it kind of underscores the problems with the passing game, which is you have, and again, Ritter's probably not the guy ultimately. Heineke's definitely not the guy ultimately. Mariota wasn't the guy. Matt Ryan at the tail end of his career. They have to get the guy they feel good about. And if it's not going to be Ritter, it's got to be somebody else in this draft class. But ultimately, this passing attack has way too much invested in it to be incredibly mediocre, which is what it is. From a week-to-week basis, you have too many turnovers. You have too many lackluster performances. Every single week we're looking at a receiver or a tight end, and we're like, how did he drop that? Why isn't this guy producing more? Like the constant drumbeat of something is wrong with this offense, especially in the red zone, I think comes back to this passing game not being cohesive, not making sense, even on a week-to-week basis. Like certainly what we saw from Heineke against the Vikings was kind of a flawed effort, but he took some good shots. There were some good things there. Wasn't allowed to do it at all. And I don't even know what this is going to look like when Ritter comes back against the Saints. And like not knowing what you have here, what's going to work, is a problem for me. So ultimately, it just feels like a mess in a way that I don't feel like it should. And again, we came into this saying, you've got some solid, not great, but solid options at wide receiver beyond Drake London. You have Kyle Pitts, you have Jonnu Smith, who's exceeded expectations. Robinson is a capable pass catching back. There are pieces here to make this work, and none of those pieces, aside from Jonnu, have been working every single week. And especially when you have the investment that you have in Kyle Pitts, the fact that Jonnu Smith comes in and looks this great, and like Arthur Smith is like excited to game up these plays for Jonnu Smith, where he's throwing the ball, where he's running in a jet sweep and stuff, it just feels like they never wanted Pitts in the first place. So
yeah, that's
I'm
the big.
A little bit, but...
Yeah, no, I mean that to me is the most problematic part of this whole thing. And because Pitts is the guy we've seen the most. We've had him here the longest of the three big picks that they've had. Pitts first, then Drake London, then Bijan. And I think the only one you can strongly argue that's been utilized appropriately is Drake London. I think he's been getting the targets. Not, last week coming back from injury was a little bit of a slower game for him. That's not that surprising. Ultimately, I think he's been getting the right amount of attention. But Kyle Pitts, like the way that they have sort of not evolved his role, like I think for me, when he was coming out, I always envisioned him as like, this is that true Jimmy Graham plus player where like he's a true tight end wide receiver hybrid. You can line him up in the slot. You can line him up out wide. You're going to try to find ways to get him one-on-ones with guys. And they've really dispensed with any interest in doing that. They basically played him almost exclusively in line. This last game, I think he played 38 snaps in line compared to like 10 elsewhere.
Kevin, there was a play. It was on the first series. It was one of the first. I mean, Kyle Pitts got the ball, so it was one of the first completions of the game. But if you go back and watch the all 22 of that play, like he is in line, hand in the dirt to the left. He just runs like the traditional like underneath levels route, right? So he's just running across the formation. He gets lit up by two Arizona linebackers on the way, and it takes him essentially an eternity in football time to actually like get all the way across the formation. And he's so late that's where Taylor Heineke's able to find him just as an outlet. But what are we doing here? This is again like Kevin Durant out here playing football. You don't have him put his hand in the dirt and then scrape through all these linebackers. Like that's what Jonnu Smith should be doing. Yeah. You should have Kyle Pitts out there kind of running, a deep comeback or, that deep, like stretch the field with Kyle Pitts. Don't make him sort through traffic. I don't get that.
Yeah. That to me is my like biggest beef with Arthur Smith. And, when you take a guy that high, especially at a position like tight end where it really had never been done before, I imagined this big role that you had envisioned, like how you were going to utilize him, all the places, positionless football, all the stuff we've been fed about that. And like, ultimately he's just playing inline tight end, like just inline tight end. Like we sort of dispensed with him even attempting to line up outside. And it's bizarre to me because I don't feel like inline tight end is really a good fit for him at all. Like, I mean, I think you can do it occasionally, to get him some looks. But like, as we've seen, like, and this was something that Jordan and I discussed a lot on Trench Talk this week, which is that the tight end blocking for the Falcons has fallen off a lot. And that's part of the reason the outside zone run is struggling. And part of that is that you're having Kyle Pitts as like a primary blocker. And it's like, that is not, having Kyle Pitts take on defensive ends is not a recipe for success. Like it's just not. Like only the best blocking tight ends are going to be able to have success doing that. I think Parker Hesse typically was the one you would want there. He's obviously on practice squad IR. He didn't even make the roster, which is, I know Aaron Freeman's a big proponent of like, it's actually Parker Hesse's loss that's torpedoed the offense, but
which I kind of agree with that. And I like Parker Hesse a lot, but think about what you just said, Gavin.
Yes, that should not be,
yeah,
that should not be the case. That your offense is reliant on one blocking tight end or it all falls apart. That's not a good situation.
Parker Hesse at all. Again, no slight to Parker Hesse, but like, how is he the linchpin of any NFL offense?
Right, exactly, and so it's like, well, Parker Hesse's gone, so I guess Kyle Pitts, now you have to be a blocking tight end. It's like, no. Like, I mean, I think Kyle Pitts, if you want him to block, have him line up outside on a cornerback and block that guy into the dirt, because I'm sorry, there's not very many corners that are going to have a lot of success going up against Kyle Pitts if he's blocking them. Like, and Kyle Pitts is like not a great blocker as a tight end, but if he was a wide receiver, I think he'd be a lot better as a blocker, you know, just because he doesn't have to block defensive ends. If he's blocking a corner, that's a completely different thing.
And wide receivers have to block in this offense. Like, he could be very valuable on the edge as a blocker as well. Like, he would bring tight end blocking skills to the receiver position and also receiver skills to the receiver. Like, yeah, there's such a way that you can totally use him. It's just, I think my biggest issue, and I've been trying to think about like the Arthur Smith offense in totality, like what is the vision for it? And I do think it is this ultra versatile. You never really know on any play either what's coming because they're formation and personnel versatile, or even who the main read or option, if it's a pass, could be, because not only could it be a different guy running the same route out of the same look on a different personnel grouping, but it could be, okay, hey, we have Kyle Pitts and we went to him this last play, but now we're going to Scotty Miller. Now we're going to Kadarrell Hodge, or now we're going to Drake. Like, they want to use everybody so that nobody has any idea of, including defenses, like who the ball's going to. But to me, it's almost like, all right, in Top Gun Maverick, right? When they come up with this great, like the hardest plan on earth is like the only plan that's going to work. And that's kind of, I feel like Arthur Smith feels like he's Maverick. And he's like, well, let me get in this plane and I will show you that I can do this run that nobody else can do. And not only do it, but do it 10 seconds better than the time that you set. Like, it doesn't have to be this hard, man. Like, sometimes you can just go ISO ball and say, Drake London, get ready. This series, we're coming to you like 4 times. And I know defenses dictate things, but like, not every single team in the NFL for years and years and years have been unable to get the balls in the hands of their best players in the most crucial situations. I am confused why that continues to be kind of the line from the organization, whether it's Julio Jones in the red zone or it's, you know, Kyle Pitts or Bijan or whoever. Like, play your good players and get them the ball, please.
Yeah.
And
go ahead, Dave, please.
Too, that's been killing me is I like Van Jefferson. Maybe Van Jefferson works out. This radicalized me when I did like the third down target share. Like, he's third on the team in third down targets now. He has caught one of them, one of 8 third down targets. Like,
he's rough, yeah, man.
Trying. And like, to me, Mac Hollins is not a great second wide receiver. I recognize there were some issues, you know, with how the offense was spaced when he was in there, but he blocks well. And he can make contested catches. And he's basically been phased out of the game plan. And we're seeing a ton of Van Jefferson, and it's not working. So, like, again, to me, it really is like, if Arthur Smith wants to be the guy that has the genius scheme and the idea that elevates everything, you cannot go out and draft 3 top 10 weapons. You need to just get him a bunch of guys so that he can play in his sandbox and make that happen. If you're not going to use these guys, especially in the red zone that you spent all that draft capital on, or even on third down, you know, and we're just going to get Kadarrell Hodge, who's done well, to be fair, and Van Jefferson, you know, in these crucial situations, then this thing is really, really broken. And I think that was a good point that you made, Will, that like, there is this pressure for him in some way to, you know, show that he's got all the answers. He's got the right answer for this thing. And he just feels like he's outthinking himself on a weekly basis in a way that doesn't need to happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's rough. Like, when you spend, this is exactly what it is. When you spend these type of resources, you expect to get certain results as a fan, as an analyst, wherever. And that's why he's pissed off the fantasy community so much. It's because, like, why aren't these guys being used like the picks they are? And like, why would you draft them if you weren't going to use them that way? And it's the fantasy guys are, you know, fantasy guys always. They're going to focus on fantasy points. Not a big shock there, right? But they're not wrong about these guys are not being utilized enough for the draft capital you've sunk into them. And like, you know, we're going to get into a lot of the aspects of this over the remainder of the show too, and also inject some optimism. We'll try, you know, maybe not very much. We'll see. But, you know, to me, it's, you know, Kyle Pitts is the most egregious one, right? And it's like, all the things you mentioned. They don't really have a good wide receiver too. Like, it would be one thing if they had T. Higgins or something, and it was like, well, we've got Drake London and T. Higgins for our outside receivers. We're kind of just like, we'd like to play Kyle Pitts outside, but do we really want to take T. Higgins off the field? Not really. You're taking Van Jefferson or Mac Hollins off the field to get Kyle Pitts lined up across from Drake London. Why are we not doing this? Like, that's an easy calculus for me. Like, I'm not, worried about losing a snap of Van Jefferson so Kyle Pitts can get a one-on-one with a corner. And this stuff is not that complicated. Like, if you have Drake and you have Kyle Pitts lined up outside, one of those guys is going to see one-on-one coverage, probably. And if not, that means they're playing a super light box, which is probably what you prefer they would do anyway, given that you want to run the football. So why are we never seeing it? It's like, if Kyle Pitts is lined up one-on-one with a corner and not having to start off a snap inline, block for a second, and then go run through trash to try to get open, Kyle Pitts one-on-one with most corners is a terrifying prospect for them. That's probably going to demand safety help. If you want to get more good looks for Drake London, it seems like a pretty good way to do it. Or if you want to take people out of the box to open up stuff for your run game, it seems like that would be a good idea for that too. But I don't really see the downside to it. So to me, when they refuse to do it, I'm like, well, why aren't you doing it? And it's like, well, because we want them to block. That's not a good answer. Like, I don't see any good answers to what they're doing, I guess. And that's my biggest concern is like, what are the conversations happening that lead to Kyle Pitts playing 40 snaps in line?
I mean, I could play, I guess, devil's advocate, make a point real quick.
Okay.
Like so the Detroit game, right? The play that Ritter missed, but early on, Kyle Pitts running that deep post, like, has 3 steps on the safety who was lined up across front. Like, I kind of get the vision if you're going to make the argument that Kyle Pitts' freakish athleticism actually allows him to access not all of the route tree, right? You're not running a comeback from like an inline tight end position, but maybe he can access certain parts of the field from that spot that most guys simply can't. So maybe it's like, okay, we can put him here, have a little bit, not only the added element of if it is a run play, now we've got an extra guy kind of in line, but we can make defenses think it's a run play. We can get him lost in the shuffle. Also, if you're number 3 to a defense and not number 1 on the outside, like, you're more likely to get a linebacker or a safety match. So there are the reasons why you would want to maybe move him inside. But to your point, Kevin, I don't need him to necessarily be the key seal back block for your cutback lane. And then he gets mauled by an outside linebacker or a defensive end. And it's just kind of like, okay, now a run that could have been set up to go 9 yards goes for like a 1.5 yard gain because he got kind of shed, and then the guy makes a tackle that Bijan didn't see coming. That's just happened too many times it's not like they're using him in the ways that I just necessarily argued for. So then does that argument even matter? It's just, again, like, maybe that is the argument, but you got to show it then.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, what they're doing is clearly not working, which makes it really easy to critique for us, because
Right.
It's not working. So it's easy. But yeah, I mean, it's, that's just the biggest red flag to me is you get a guy like this at 4th overall. He's one of the most uniquely talented players that we've seen come out of the draft in the last 3 drafts, and you can't find a role for him. You can't figure out how to make him a featured target on your offense. And it's like that to me now that, like, cause it's like in year 1, there were no questions, right? 1,000-yard season. Everything's great. Year 2, the target share was good enough. And he was playing with Marcus Mariota, so you could sort of wave it away. You're like, well, Marcus Mariota can't hit the broadside of a barn beyond 15 yards. He missed Kyle Pitts about 20 times, over the course of the season on stuff that he was open on. And Kyle Pitts still had one of the highest target shares of any tight end in the NFL. So you're like, okay, fine. Those excuses are gone now. Like that, none of those things are the case anymore. He doesn't have Marcus Mariota. Now, maybe some people will argue that Ritter's worse than Mariota as a passer. I don't think so. Taylor Heineke has been bad, so maybe you could argue that he's worse, but I don't think he's honestly worse. But, and Kyle Pitts is getting like 3 to 5 targets a game. Like, it's just, that's nowhere near enough for a guy that you prioritize to that extent and that we all know is talented. And I think it's starting to obviously rub off on him because I don't expect that he's super happy with his role. Now, Kyle Pitts is a complete consummate professional. Like, he reminds me of a Matt Ryan. He's never going to say one slanderous thing about this team ever. But you can't tell me that he's not pissed off. I mean, like, if I'm the 4th overall pick and I'm getting 3 to 5 targets a game, and I'm getting open and like, I mean, there's no way that's not affecting him. And just given what I worry about the team starting to check out. Not that I think it's happened at this stage, but the whole team is clearly stuck in the mud. I mean, everyone looks like they're kind of in some sort of malaise. Everyone's making mistakes. Everyone's struggling. And to me, it just really looks, you can kind of see when teams are starting to lose it a little bit. And that doesn't necessarily mean they've given up on the coaching staff or anything like that, but it can be a death spiral. And that's sort of where we're entering the bye at, is like, this is the start of a death spiral. Now, there's a certain point, like in Maverick, right? You can't get below the flight deck, right? You got to stay above the ceiling, and so we haven't hit the ceiling yet where you got to eject, but we're getting close to that. How about that segue? That's professional segue.
I freaking love it, man.
Yeah,
look at
tied
you.
into the Maverick reference. Yep.
You can be my wingman anytime.
Anytime, bud. Yeah. But let's talk about coming out of the tailspin and potentially saving this season, because look, they're 4-6. It's not great, right? They are on a 3-game losing streak. They lost 2 games that they really should have won. Really probably should beat the Vikings too, even though the Vikings actually look like they're not bad at this stage, obviously. But they're 4-6 and they're in a terrible division again. So like, if they beat the Saints coming out of the bye, they will be in first place once again. So they've got a much wider runway, like a longer runway than a lot of other teams because of the division. So yes, like, can the Falcons save their season after the bye? The title of the episode, yes, but it's going to be hard. Obviously, it helps that they have 4 division games remaining. So if they win those 4 games, they're probably set, because they'll have a 6-0 division record, and they'll have handed 2 losses to the Saints, another loss to the Bucs, and another loss to the Panthers. The Panthers are out of it almost entirely at this point. But so
Could
they
you
have
imagine?
That would be hilarious. That would actually be the funniest end to the season if they go on a tear and actually win the division with like 7 wins. But
Oh my God.
that would be actually really hilarious. But I'm curious, and I'll go to Dave first on this. What do you think about the opportunity the Falcons have here? Is it fool's gold, Dave, if they do manage to pull this off? Do you think they can pull it off? I mean, they play the easiest schedule in the NFL by a significant margin over the last 7. Do you have any hope whatsoever that they can turn this around and sneak a division win in here somehow?
Yeah, I do. And the reason for that is, again, this team is wildly underachieving. And we can debate, and we certainly have over the last couple of years, including in 2021, where we had some hilarious debates about how talented the team was, with some folks being like, they have enough talent to contend. And, we won't go there today, but they have not played up to their ability. And I think I look at that punt return against the Cardinals as like an indicator of what they're doing. Like, D'Angelo Malone comes flying down the field unblocked. He's got the angle. He does like 80 to 90% of what he needs to do. And then at the end, he takes the wrong angle. He misses a tackle. He gets back up. He misses another tackle. And I don't want to pick on Malone, but this is sort of what the Falcons have been doing all year, right? They're like 80% of the way there. And it's these detailed mistakes. It's the turnovers. It's the penalties. It's just sloppy little things that you wouldn't expect from this team based on everything they talk about being about. So I look at them and I say, you're not that far away from being a decent football team. And decent is all it's going to take in the NFC South. I think, an argument that they're a good team, a great team, they're going to make a huge playoff run, that seems hard to believe, right? A lot would have to come together. But to start winning some games, to stay in the NFC South until the end, to even potentially win it, given that they have a 2-0 record in the NFC South already and can get to 3-0 by beating the Saints, sure, I believe that's possible. It's all about fixing the little things that have chronically gone wrong. Now, the problem, the less optimistic take there is they haven't fixed them, and it's been 10 weeks. So am I super confident it's going to happen? Not necessarily, but can it happen? Absolutely. So I guess my most optimistic take is if everything goes right, they can win the crappiest division in football. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I to get to a winning record now would require 5-2 the rest of the way, which, like, you say that and it's like, oh, there's 0% chance. But remember the schedule, right? They play the Saints twice, who are very not good. They're basically the Falcons, but spending $40 million on a quarterback. They get to play the Bucs again. They get to play the Panthers again. And then they play the Colts. Maybe the Colts are the best team left in the schedule somehow. The Gardner Minshew Colts. They play the Bears, so like it's not like it's a murderer's row. They play the Jets too. So like if you can score 18 points, you're probably beating the Jets. And at least so far, they've been pretty good at scoring 18 points. So we'll see if they can get that done again. But, looking at that schedule, it's a much easier proposition than it would be for like the Bucs, who got to go and play the 49ers this week and got to go, play a bunch of other teams. And it's a lot tougher for some of these NFC South teams than it is for the Falcons. So, they need a miraculous turnaround. The one good thing is that if you're going to have a significant change to how your team looks, typically you're going to get that coming off a bye week where you've actually had time to implement major changes, major quote unquote. I mean, how much can you really do in a couple weeks of practice, but more significant than you could at any other point during the season. But Will, what do you think about the rest of the season? Do you think this is a salvageable situation at this stage?
I mean, I absolutely think it's salvageable, right? Because to Dave's point, there is a big difference in losing these games that you feel like you should win, being in pretty much every game, like outside of Jacksonville, outside of Detroit, they've been in every game. Now, I know they've not played a murderer's row of teams this year, but by and large, under Arthur Smith, like they've been in more games than they've been out of. To me, again, that is a sign of at least baseline quality in kind of the organization and the locker room. Like these are the teams where you look at Pittsburgh year in and year out. The talent fluctuates, but they always kind of have at least a baseline level of we're going to go into each game and it's going to be a game for 50 minutes, right? The Falcons do have that. And I do think that coaching does play a role in kind of that week in and week out. We're doing what gives us the best chance in this game, in a sport, to counter what the other team likes to do, to take advantage of the matchups they provide. So because of that, I do know they're going to be in most of these games down the stretch. It's just, again, like when you look at the Arizona game and you say, okay, now they've got the Jets. The Jets defense might be the single best unit that the Falcons will face the remainder of the season. So I don't even know if I could say, yeah, they're going to beat Zach Wilson and the Jets at this point, because I could see a game where it is 17-13 going the wrong way, right? Yeah. So that's kind of where it's two things for me. It's does the bye week actually come at kind of the perfect time here? Because we always talk a lot about going into the bye week on a high note, but sometimes the best bye week can be the one that stops the bleeding, right? And they have been on a 3-game losing streak here. And you were talking about players starting to tune them out. I've seen a locker room tune out a coach. I've seen a locker room tune out the media. I've seen a locker room basically this time of year be like, we're so checked out. Like if Call of Duty was dropping in 2020, boy, let me tell you. So yep. I don't see that from this team at all. I think that the personalities in the locker room, the guys like Calais Campbell, even, Drake London, like from everybody on this roster, yeah, you're going to have guys that are listening to this coaching staff that are buying in because they recognize where they're at. So the second part and the second thing that I'm really curious about, and again, if things go poorly, then to me, this is a big indictment. But right now, I'm still holding out hope to see if they're onto something. And that is, I do think Arthur Smith has had a very creative way and has been at the forefront of just thinking about the sport and the league and where trends going and what are other sports leagues doing, what are other professions like in other industries, like how are they getting an advantage on their competition? And would I be shocked given the way that they have treated some player injuries, given their conservative nature with some of the inactives? We saw Saquon Graham just inactive for a couple of games there. Bijan Robinson's usage ticking down a little bit. I do think they've been playing a little bit of a long game here. and knowing, hey, a lot of teams get banged up. The reason that teams fade down the stretch, sometimes I think the Bills are maybe a good example of this. Like, so many dudes get banged up that you're relying on that you're just a totally different team and you can't hang. So if they have been smart and if they have been hoping to get to this bye week to then really implement another plan, maybe they have been going away from some of their big name guys to just say, we got 7 games, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson, buckle up. We're coming to you. Defenses now have to worry about some of all these other fringe guys, and we're going to go to our money guys, and hopefully that gets us through the game, like the final stretch. I'm curious to see if there is any of that element to this, because again, I like hearing Arthur Smith talk and hearing the way he thinks about the game. Like, I do think he is cognizant of not just week in and week out, but season-long trends and approaches. And so now that the bye week is here, I'm really, really curious to see how they make these tweaks, because I think they've been thinking about it for a while, what they're going to do when this bye week gets here and how they're going to be different coming out of it. So that gives me hope that, again, they can provide something that's going to be totally different, New Orleans has never seen before, and that they can get a couple of wins, and maybe that puts them on a little bit of a streak to close out the season. But at this point, I am totally in a wait and see improvement mode. Like, I'm not predicting the Falcons on the next Bleav in Falcons when I do, a matchup with whoever the Saints radio people. Like, I'm picking the opponents. Like, the Falcons have lost my confidence going into these matchups until they can prove otherwise.
Yeah. And that's the big thing, is it's multifaceted. Like, can they turn it around and win? Like, absolutely. It's never off the table. I mean, unlike I think last year, you could really see like that this year the talent is really not the issue. There's not a lack of talent here. Obviously the defense, the margin for error is a lot thinner now because they lost Grady Jarrett, and without David Onyemata, it was ugly up front. So ideally Onyemata will be back. I don't think there's really any long-term concern with his injury. So Onyemata comes back. Hopefully Lakeil London will be back soon as well. He was really starting to come on, and that'll help your depth, there. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's how it's not just do they win games, it's also how do they look. Because if they scrape by to 8-9 and win the division, but it's ugly and they get blown out in the playoffs, like, to me, that doesn't instill any confidence in this regime, in Arthur Smith in particular. If they kind of heat up and end the season on a really high note, and they're playing well and they're scrappy in their playoff game, even if they don't necessarily win, but they look like they belong there, that's very different. Like 8-9 squeaking into the playoffs, looking ugly the entire time and getting blown out in the first round is very different than 8-9 improving the whole time, going into the playoffs on a little bit of a hot streak and putting up a good fight. And the offense just looks better. They're utilizing guys, two very different scenarios. The record's the same, the outcome's the same, playoffs and a loss in the first round, but how it looks and how the team feels matters a lot in the analysis, because that's why it's not just numbers on a page. If you could just look at, the record and be like, okay, that team was good, that team was bad, then there'd be nothing to it. If that was the case, you could look at last year's Vikings and be like, oh, that was a great team. They were 13-4. They had like a negative point differential at 13-4. So, and of course they got waxed in the first round of the playoffs. So, there are lots of ways that it can go, and so I don't want to make any statements like, oh, well, if they don't hit X record, then Arthur Smith should be fired, or if they don't, win a playoff game, because the manner of how it happens matters a lot. But to me, and you know how I feel, Will. Like my faith has been deeply shaken to the point where Arthur Smith needs to prove it to me now that he needs to, like, if he wants to stick around, I need him to show the flexibility that we've sort of been promised. I need to see Kyle Pitts involved. I need to see the offense live up to what we were expecting, or I'm ready to move on. Now, I'm not Arthur Blank, so it's ultimately not my decision. Obviously, it's Arthur Blank's decision, but can it happen? Yes. They have a very favorable schedule to make it happen. This is not a huge uphill climb, but they have to get significantly better, obviously, to have any chance of pulling it off.
I completely agree. And I mean, in terms of the long-term, like Arthur Smith job security, if they reach the playoffs, I believe he will be back for a 4th year. I think the quarterback ripcord that they have kind of been keeping for a little bit, I know they drafted Ritter, but they've yet to really say, okay, let's go all in on the quarterback position this offseason, and we are going to get the number one free agent guy, or we are trading up to go get, Drake May at number 2. Like, they really haven't played that card yet. And that's a pretty powerful card in the NFL. And so I think even with Desmond Ridder, if he comes back and he's just kind of been the same guy and they know the answer that he's not I would fully expect this offseason, if they limp into the playoffs and don't look good doing it. Now, if they turn it around and everything's fine, then, they can approach the offseason. I'm sure they will a little bit differently, the way they kind of maybe long-term envision. But if they feel they need to, they do have that quarterback card in their back pocket. And I would expect them to use that. But it's just, again, like to your point, you've got a defense playing as well as they have been playing. And while I expect that will and can continue, I just don't know if it's going to continue in some of the crunch moments we've seen and some of the, all right, the Falcons turn the ball over, man, the defense makes a great play and gets kind of off the field or limits them to a field goal. They have been playing nicely in some crunch moments. And even if the offense turns things around a little bit, if the defense kind of ticks back slightly, which we have seen at times the last couple of weeks, maybe you find yourself in the same exact boat. And instead of them being 25-23, it's just like 29-26, and your offense is a little bit better, but your defense is kind of, so that's what concerns me a little bit. I know I was optimistic earlier, but I worry that not everything is going to mix perfectly at any point this season for the Falcons.
Yeah. And to me, like, I know, Jeff Schultz of The Athletic, good piece there talking about, don't be waiting for Smith to get fired this year because it's not going to happen. And I think we all sort of agree with that. Like, I know fans want it, but that's just not Arthur Blank style. He did it with Quinn mid-season because he gave Quinn that last chance, and then 0-5 happened. And so, yeah, at that point, okay, it's over. But this has not been like that so far. Like Will said, I think it was obvious that the team had checked out, and when that happens, it's time to move on. And I agree. I think we're starting to see cracks. Drake London speaking out for the first time, really, that's a crack. It's not like the thing is collapsing. It's just the first sort of cracks of frustration starting to show, and the bye week's a good time to reset that. So we'll see if they can make that happen. But yeah, I think we got a lot of work to do. The Falcons really need to figure out a way to fix this and look good doing it, because I think just getting wins that look terrible, that's not going to sell any fans. And you mentioned with the quarterback situation too, like, they have to be very careful with how they handle that, because Arthur Smith, I know it's the nightmare scenario for a lot of fans, and I don't think it's particularly likely, but them going out and signing Ryan Tannehill in free agency is not going to cut it. Like, they will be facing a full-on fan revolt if that's their quarterback plan. And to some extent, I think, as good as Kirk Cousins was playing this year, going out, shelling out close to $40 million for Kirk Cousins off a torn Achilles, entering like age 37 season, that's not going to cut it either. And if that's his plan, I seriously question why you'd want to bring him back to execute that plan, because it doesn't seem like a sound plan to me. I mean, I get, for the I don't see why he wouldn't just go back to the Vikings at this point. I mean, I don't really think there's much of there's not really going to be a lot of takers for the money that he's probably seeking at this stage. But, to me, it's like we're probably looking at a rookie, honestly. Like, I don't, and it seems like, I think to some people, they'll think that means like you're sort of starting over, but I don't think a veteran, an aging veteran quarterback is really an option. I don't think Kyler Murray's an option, and despite some people thinking that it is, like, he's probably not leaving Arizona. That contract is not easy to trade, and the Cardinals really are better off keeping him if they can make it work, which it seems like, based on the one game sample that we've seen personally, it seems like they might be able to make it work. So to me, it's like, well, you're probably drafting a rookie then, and that's a whole other crapshoot. But I think you can sell fans on a top rookie. Like, that's something that you can sell. Jaden Daniels Hive, let's go. But, whether that's Penix, I would be happy with Penix too. Those are probably the two guys they'll be actually considering if they don't trade up. Jaden Daniels and Michael Penix. Maybe Bo Nix is still around or whatever. JJ McCarthy is going to be a Patriot, so you can write that down now. But yeah, I mean, Dave, I wanted to get your thoughts here too before we wrap up. But what do you think about sort of the outlook here and going into 2024, what are you sort of hoping to see from this team?
Yeah, I think that there's two things, right? Without Ritter really blowing up over the last 7 weeks of the season, which I'd love to see it would really simplify things for this team. They would get to say, I was right all along, and they'd have a cheap quarterback for another couple seasons. But, realistically, not expecting that. So I think a rookie quarterback makes a ton of sense to me. Somebody on the site in a comment asked me today, like, if Smith is going to be here for 2024, do you take a rookie and worry that maybe, he's going to get fired anyways and that offense isn't going to work out and the rookie's going to get screwed up, or you take that stopgap year with a veteran? And I was like, of course you take the rookie, because you want the long-term, gains for that. And I think this organization's belief in Ritter tells you ultimately that they're going to go get another rookie. They want somebody they can build around for the long haul. I think that's important to Terry Fontenot in particular, that this team be well positioned, not just for the next year, but the years to come. And I think this is a good class to get a guy in. So that is one of the big priorities. I think the other big priority, and the Falcons have hinted at this by chasing Montez Sweat, with a couple other would-be moves that they weren't able to make, they have to go get a top-tier edge rusher. And I think they've wanted to do it. It hasn't worked out. But I think that's where a big chunk of your money for this upcoming offseason is going to go, is getting that guy, because you see it at every turn how much they miss just having that particular guy, right, who can wrap up a quarterback instead of just kind of vaguely threatening him for 10 seconds while he runs around in circles. So, everything else is, you need to maybe swap out one spot on the offensive line. You need to add a credible second receiver. You've got to restock some of the guys you're going to lose, some of the veterans. But to me, if you can come out of this coming off season with a guy you feel good about as your franchise quarterback, whoever that ends up being, and you can add a legitimate top shelf pass rusher like I've only been asking for since the Falcoholic started back in 2006, that would make me feel pretty good. And I do think those are going to be the organizational priorities, regardless of how this season goes.
Yeah, I agree. And they sort of have to be. And, you probably have to earmark that first rounder for the quarterback, which limits your ability to get that sort of top tier edge rusher in the draft. So I think they're sort of going to be forced to try to make a move for someone in free agency. But again, we know like how dicey that is, like how many of these guys are going to hit free agency. It looked like a good class on paper. It always does. We've already seen, I think, 3 guys taken off. We saw Montez Sweat's off. We've seen, who was the other guy? Leonard Williams got traded. Who was it? Rashawn Gary of the Packers. We'll see. Maybe Danielle Hunter breaks free of the Vikings. Who knows? Maybe the Jaguars don't re-sign Josh Allen. But a lot of teams have money next year. Like the Falcons have a lot of money, but most teams have a lot of money. Like a lot of teams have a lot of money, and then there's a couple teams that have no money, like the Saints, who are 82 million under again. So just saying, that's not getting any better. It gets worse every single year. They kick it down the road. So,
Love it.
yeah, I love it too. I'm just waiting for that to collapse. This Saints season is going exactly like I predicted, by the way. Like, oh yeah, well, Derek Carr's probably better than Andy Dalton, but like that roster got worse and is older and much more prone to breaking down. And what do you know?
Yeah.
What do you know? It's happening. So
to take it back though to the defensive end point, so I'm really curious because I think we've seen now a big enough sample size where the Falcons, I think, prefer some of their veteran guys or their defensive guys to come from the NFL. I think they want to see players who have done it at least the guys that they're going to invest and pay a lot of money in. They need to have seen that production against the guys you're going to see on Sunday, and they need to see a little bit of a track record for that. And they also, I think, tend to, like, I wouldn't be surprised at all if when free agency in the new league year kind of starts, instead of the Falcons being in the market for the top 2 free agent guys, do they get creative and do we hear news of a trade for somebody we're not necessarily thinking of, but then when we hear it, we're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I can see that. I can get behind it. somebody who's a number 2 for a team, but you're like, the upside's there, kind of like Michael Turner back in the day, right? Like LaDainian Tomlinson's back up and you're like, oh, this is cool. All right, let's see what he can do. And he flashes. Jeff Okuda is a great example. Jonnu Smith's a great example. And the price tag, as we saw in this last trade deadline, far, far lower if you're going to make a trade than going and just paying for a guy in free agency, right? Yes, I know you got to bring the contract in and then you can renegotiate or whatever, like that's set in stone. But I kind of feel like the Falcons could go that approach. Maybe it's not they're still getting a pro guy, but maybe it's not through free agency like we all expect. Maybe it happens during free agency, but maybe it's all right, the Falcons sent a 4th round pick and a 5th the next year for X player who's the 3rd guy on the Eagles defensive line or the 49ers or, like just somebody who makes sense with maybe a bigger role. Quarterback wise though, Dave, I totally agree with you that a young rookie quarterback makes a lot of sense. And I think when people, they would point to like somebody like Josh Rosen, right, in Arizona, and you say, well, they were drafted by one regime, then Cliff Kingsbury comes in, and it's like, what are we going to do with this guy? We're going to draft her, and you just kind of get stuck in, well, what the heck are we? What's happening now? Sometimes, though, you could get a Tua situation where, again, he's drafted under a different regime, and then when you're doing the coaching carousel, if it comes to that point, maybe your young quarterback becomes the prize gem of your franchise as opposed to some of the others that you're competing against for a top name as a head coaching candidate. And you get a Mike McDaniel who says, I see in Tua my muse. Like, I see the guy who executes the offense in the way that I want it to be executed. I'm going to Miami, right? So sometimes, yeah, it's a negative, but if you're smart about it, and I think we all think Terry Fontenot is pretty smart. You've got the long-term organizational stability with a guy like Rich McKay. Like, they're going to have a plan, not just for next year, but also the future. So if they take a quarterback, I think that's going to be an asset long-term as well. Like you said, Dave, as opposed to, all right, we're going to let Arthur Smith draft a guy and we don't know if he's going to necessarily be here next year. So we hope he gets it right. Otherwise, what are we doing? Like, I think it'll be made as a benefit to the Falcons long-term if they get the right guy.
Yeah. I agree. I think that they're going to want that top quarterback, particularly I think if the wheels fall off, they're obviously if they're picking in the top 10 like they are now, they're definitely taking a quarterback, because you're probably not even going to have to move to get one at this point. Unless you want to go all the way for Drake May or something like that. But,
I love that. Did you just right off top of your
that
head,
was right off the
for
cuff.
Drake May,
yeah,
baby.
that was actually perfect.
That's why you get paid the big bucks.
Yeah, this is why I'm in this chair. I get the Secret Lab chair. That's why, But Secret Lab sponsored the show, by the way. Send me some more pillows or something. But no, it's I'm. You guys know I'm Team Jaden Daniels, and part of that is because he's probably going to be available when they pick at like 9 or 10. Right now, he's going like the 3rd round in drafts. That's not going to last. I'll tell you that right now. He's the dual threat. So I think, and he has an amazing arm, beautiful deep balls. Like, just that was his bread and butter all the time when he was at Arizona State, and he was really not a very polished passer. And since coming to LSU, he has completely changed in a good way. Like last year, he completely cut the turnovers out of his game, played very cautiously. This year, it's bombs away, and like he's like taken what he learned at limiting turnovers and added back in the crazy deep throwing. I think he's thrown 30 touchdowns and 4 picks this year, and almost rushed for 1,000 yards on the ground to go with it. So he's not going to be a 3rd round pick, guys. I'm telling you that right now. If you think Jaden Daniels is getting out of the 1st round with those stats, and he's going to test absurd at the combine, I'm sure, it's not going to happen. Maybe top 10, teams may treat him like Lamar, and you might be able to get him a little bit later in the 1st. But if you draft a guy like that, who's got that dual threat ability, he could just fit in almost any scheme. Like, he's shown that he can play more under control in the pocket. He did that a lot last year. And he's shown that he can handle 100 carries in the run game. Now, you're not going to ask him to run the ball 100 times in the NFL, but like, getting a guy that's flexible like that, I think would appeal to a lot of different coaching staffs. Like, if you want him to throw from the pocket, he can. He can also create off schedule and all that good stuff. So, I
still think it's going to be Bo Nix. I don't know why. I'm not even saying that's my favorite quarterback in this class. having watched Bo Nix play again, knowing I think the Falcons really value certain intangibles in their quarterback position. And to me, I think he just screams like Arthur Smith would watch this guy and just be like, "That I love that guy. Like, let's get him in here." And if he's there, if it's like a Will Levis situation, a Billy Jeans situation where they just can trade up to the first pick in the second round and like take Bo Nix, I don't know. That just keeps circling around in the back of my head.
It could be, yeah. And like I know everybody loves Penix. I also think, Penix is having an amazing season, and I'm so happy he's been able to stay healthy. But there's a legitimate chance that he falls out of the first round because the medicals are terrifying, from what I understand. So like, Michael Penix has played great football. It's not a question of that. But you've seen, you guys all know, you'll just see guys drop out and go on like day 3 when they were projected first rounders, and they'll be like, "What the hell?" And it's like, medicals. Teams and if you're talking about a quarterback too, like that could really ding him, and I hope it doesn't, because I think he's absolutely deserving of being a top 20 pick.
We're going to hear so many negative things about all these quarterbacks in the coming month. Like, it is going to get brutal out here. I mean, we're going to Caleb Williams, you think you're having it rough now, man, buckle up. No, it's going to be, it's always brutal in the pre-draft process, but definitely a fun class. We got a lot to look forward to, whether the Falcons are good or bad. Lots of draft takes. This draft class is pretty good. It's probably better overall than last year, like significantly better because of all the fifth-year seniors coming out for the COVID year. Senior Bowl is going to be really good this year. Last year was pretty mediocre, honestly. So like we'll have a lot of fun. If they're picking high again, we'll have a lot of fun. But just for the sake of different content, I would like to be able to talk about not the 8th pick. So could we at least get it to be like the 9th pick, or like, or like be in the top 5 again, whatever. But if it's the 8th pick again, we're going to have words, because like how many, come on guys, we can't just be picking at 8 forever. Okay. We got to get some variety in the off season, but it's very up in the air, as you guys can tell. I'm not holding out hope for them making the playoffs, but because of the division, I think it's certainly possible. But I do, I wonder if Arthur Smith survives not making the playoffs. We'll just have to see. At this point, it seems like he would still be safe, assuming the wheels don't fall completely off, but it's easy to say that now, and maybe not so easy when you've ended the season poorly. So we'll see how that develops. But, I think ultimately the Falcons can save their season after the bye. We all certainly hope they figure it out. I think there's certainly the opportunity that they at least look better, even if they don't completely salvage it. If they just like get on the right track and look a lot better, even if they fall short of the playoffs, then even if they get the damn 8th pick again, if they just look a lot better doing it, then that goes a long way. But I can't handle this, like, we're going to barely scrape wins out and lose the last second a bunch and get punked by basically every team. That's the stuff that I can't really deal with for another year. So you're a real style, like, over substance guy. I didn't necessarily know.
I know
you want to win, but you want to look good doing it too.
Yeah.
See, I'm all about just scratching and clawing out those dirty
just win,
wins,
baby.
Man. I just want 17-16 victories for 18 weeks, baby.
I'll take that too. Yeah. If we could get 17 wins, that'd be great. But Dave, what are you hoping for over the last little stretch here as we get to it?
I'd like to see a playoff berth, right? Like, I'm still holding out hope. I would love to not have to kind of hit the reset button on any of this if you don't have to. I would love for something to work for this Falcons team. I would love to not be sitting here at the end of the season and saying, well, it's the 6th straight losing season, but next year we're going to get them, because it gets a little bit older and a little less convincing every year. You got to say it. So I'm definitely hoping. I'm not in like the, I hope things go south. If they do go south, let's over. But I really, really hope that they can figure this thing out, go 4-3, 5-2, make a playoff run, make some noise, whatever noise it might be, and then still be well positioned to hopefully shake things up a little bit in the off season. So that's the hope. That's the dream. I don't know how optimistic I am about it. I'll probably be, glued to those mock drafts, Kevin, but that's the hope. It's still, there's a sliver of hope there. There is.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the best point by you all pod though, Dave. I don't know if I have it in me after a 6th straight losing season to next June, July, be like, this is the year, baby. Get ready for a stretch. Like I kind of went all in this year on the hype trade because I felt it. We all believed it, right? It was like year 3, here we go. They got the pieces. So I'll have to take a little bit of a step back if they don't reach the play. If things are still murky, if it's still kind of a lot of the same, it'll be a little bit more of a subdued spring and summer, I think, from all of us probably, because we'll be a little bit more like, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice. No, I'm not going to let you fool me twice.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we're looking at, guys. Hopefully they do get it together. But yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not going to hope for them to lose or anything like that. You know, that's not really my thing. I know some people want just relief in any way, where, you know, and I think a lot of people feel like just firing Smith will be some kind of relief. It's not really. It's just another flip. It's just another coin flip, and maybe maybe it's more like a D20, D&D terms. It's another roll, right? Because it's rarely just 50-50. So it's like maybe you roll a 20 and you get the next Belichick, or you get, the next Kyle Shanahan. Hopefully this one can win Super Bowls. I think if you roll a 20, the one should win Super Bowls. That's my opinion. But, or maybe you roll a 15 and you get a good coach. Maybe Ben Johnson comes here and he's like looking like the next Sean McVay or another, talented offensive mind. Or maybe you roll a 10 and it's sort of middling. Maybe you roll a 1 and you fire Josh McDaniels, within the first 4 games or something like that. Urban Meyer, Jim Harbaugh, speaking of college coaches. No, I don't think Jim Harbaugh would be that terrible, but it could go any way. It's not a guarantee that things will get better. It's not a guarantee that really anything nice happens. It could be terrible. The new coach could come in and want to change everything. I don't know why you'd hire someone like that, but it could happen. So change for the sake of change is not wise in this business, and that's why you don't see a lot of teams making snap decisions, because just going to someone else doesn't mean that your problems are fixed. You still got to fix the problems. Sometimes it's easier to fix your problems with the people that helped create them, because maybe they have some insight into how they got there and how they can fix it. So that's what I'm hoping for. I like Smith. I know he's come off as an asshole lately, and I think it's clear that he's frustrated, but I think when Smith is not necessarily like that all the time. I know when people sort of cut his clip, like his press conference clips short, he looks a little more curt than he really is. But he's got to get me back. I'm willing to come back. Okay, I will come back, but I need a little, I need a little sweet talking. I need some a nice dinner or something from Arthur Smith. Lay out a nice feast over these last 7 games for us to partake in, and we can all return to the table. I don't know where this metaphor is going, but
you're just missing those training camp buffets, buddy.
Yeah,
I'm
I am.
With you. Where are my breakfast tacos, Arthur?
Yes,
come on.
Yeah, that's really that. Yeah, I got to get some food after this, apparently. But you should all be open to this team having a big comeback and looking great. Like you shouldn't be rooting against that, because if that happens, the idea is maybe the problems are fixed. Maybe Smith does look within and fix some of the issues he's having, and this team's on a much better path. That's what we're hoping for. We'll see if it happens. Probably not particularly likely, but crazy stuff happens in the NFL all the time. I mean, we saw a guy come off the street with no practice reps and win an NFL game. So, it can happen, right? Crazy stuff. Yeah. Did that happen to the Falcons? Oh, my bad. Yeah. I blacked out. I didn't even remember that game. But it's going to be a tough season the rest of the way, but there's a chance. It's a chance it gets better. So we had a couple donations real quick. Thanks, guys, for donating. Always appreciate that. We got Brandon Brass with the $2. What's up, Brandon? He says, all right, early 2024 draft takes. We're getting Marvin Harrison Jr. He's going to be that perfect decoy for those Jonnu Smith screens. Yeah, like that. Love that, Brandon. Yeah, perfect decoy for Jonnu Smith. I love it. I feel like they actually can't. No, you can't draft another receiver. You can't have one in the first round. You're done on skill positions. You're maxed out. No more. You can't have them. So there's just too many now. Now, if you want to take a wide receiver on day 2, I'll have that conversation. But yeah, they don't even use the ones they have enough right now for me to get behind a wide receiver in the first round. I don't think anyone's seriously mocking a wide receiver to the Falcons at this point, but maybe some are. Nah, I don't know.
Give it time.
Yeah, it'll happen. Yep. Let's see. We got Ray Moon with a couple here. What's up, Ray? Says, I think Ritter will be better after the bye. assuming that Ritter starts. Yeah. But defensively, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, that's the big question. Like, the defense was so good. I think it seems like they might have been playing a little bit over what they are, but yeah, I mean, I can't see them going back to Taylor Heineke now. I mean, I think you sort of have to let Ritter ride it out and see what you got. So yeah, I mean, I hope that Ritter obviously plays better than Heineke was playing and better than Ritter was playing over the first part of the season. But yeah, I mean, I think the defense will be okay ultimately. I do still trust the defense. Maybe I'm a fool, but I do still trust the defense. It's weird to say that, but I do.
They have some easy offenses the second half too. So I mean, there's that.
There is that. That should help things for sure. And we got Raymond with the last one with $5. He says, I want to see Arthur Smith go back to the option. Whatever they did against Washington was beautiful, and we haven't seen it nearly as much since then. Yeah, I mean, honestly, that Washington game plan was pretty good. It seemed like they'd found a way to exploit that defense, and we're getting some stuff done there. It's just the turnovers, that was really what crushed them. They were moving the ball really well. So if we could do that without the turnovers, then we're cooking. So that's really the secret to this team, is just stop making the dumb mistakes. And in theory, it should be possible, right? Like if you're losing games because of dumb mistakes, if you just stop the dumb mistakes, then you should be good to go. You should start winning. You don't have to it's not like we're the Jets where it's like, well, we've lost 5 offensive linemen on IR, so now we have to hope that our third string tackle is going to be able to hold up for the rest of the season. It's not that dire. It's more like, can we fix the dumb stuff? And there's a chance. There's a chance they can. Better chance than some things, but these are the Falcons, so it's probably going to be the most hilariously painful way that things could go. That seems to be what happens most weeks. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Tonight's show was, of course, brought to you by Bet Online. Before we sign off, I want to thank our wonderful guest this evening. First of all, we have Will McFadden. He's at Will McFadden, host of Bleav in Falcons, and another wonderful writer, contributor extraordinaire over at thefalcoholic.com. Will, what are you working on? Anything you want to let the people know about?
Yeah, a couple of things. So tomorrow we will have the, bye week edition of Bird's Eye View, where I kind of give some advanced scouting on everybody that the Falcons still have left on their schedule. So we've been talking a lot about these final 7 games, but you'll get an idea of how the Jets have played, how the Saints going into this matchup, who's maybe an X factor based on the way that the team has looked over the last 4 or 5 weeks. So check that out on the Falcoholic.com. And then on Bleav in Falcons, I didn't really know what we were going to do bye week, Thanksgiving, all of that stuff. But Ovi, my co-host, Ovi Mihaly, came through pretty big. And earlier this afternoon, we talked with Jesse Bates. So that will be dropping tomorrow morning. We've got a little bye week interview with Jesse Bates, talking about the defense, kind of what are the strengths, how did it come together so quickly to become really the unit for this team. And then, of course, we got into post-bye week, what does the team have to do? He's a team captain. It's as much on him as it is anybody to get everything corrected and get him going in the right direction. So be on the lookout for that. Bleav in Falcons. We got an interview with Jesse Bates dropping nice and early tomorrow morning.
All right. Well, that's fantastic stuff. I'm excited to listen to that. Great get there. That's great
all
stuff.
Ovi, man. I can't take any credit for this.
No, I mean, I love it. I'm excited to listen to that one. You guys should check it out for sure. Also with us, I'm really excited to listen to that one. All right, guys. Also with us, of course, Dave Choate at the Falcoholic, the boss man, editor-in-chief at the site. Dave, anything you'd like to plug before we sign off tonight?
I don't have a Jesse Bates interview in my back pocket, so I just
you don't.
It's unfortunate, but no, I mean, we will have the Saints coverage coming up, obviously, next week. We're recharging a little bit, too, at the Falcoholic this week, but still some great, content about the rest of the NFL, including Bird's Eye View. I'm going to do something for Friday, kind of like what you should know about the bye week, recapping where the team is and where they're going. It's not particularly pleasant, as this discussion has shown you, but, it'll still be a good read, hopefully. So yeah, just, all the great work you guys are doing all week long. We'll have it and we'll crank it up to 11 because we hate the Saints. So that'll be great.
Yes, we can always get by on Saints hate. That can sustain us even in the darkest seasons. And again, if Arthur Smith sweeps the Saints, that will go a long way with fans. Okay, like maybe things aren't going so great, but if he gets 2 wins against the Saints, that'll cover up a lot of problems with this fan base. That's the secret to getting in with this team. Okay, like Arthur, just beat the Saints, and we're willing to overlook a lot if you just beat the Saints every year. So start there. Let's start after the bye with that big Saints dub, and then we could talk about 2024. Okay, but no. Sincerely, thanks to everyone for hanging out with us tonight. Thanks to every one of these wonderful guests for coming on and sharing their insights on this just, hilariously broken and lovable loser team that we follow. Maybe a little bit less lovable over the last couple of weeks, but, we're still here. We'll be here. We can't quit this team. Come on. If we could, we'd have quit a long time ago. So, you guys are, I'm sure, the same way, but we'll be back. I will have my first mock draft coming on Friday, so get hyped for that. Everyone I told you it was coming. We lost to the Cardinals, so you're getting that mock draft. And if you've heard, if you listen to this show, you'll know who we're taking in the first round. And, if you want to be mad about that, that's on you. But, I'm putting all my chips in on a certain person going in the first round. So, if it happens, I'll look like a genius. If not, I'll just quietly sweep it under the rug with my other 90% of mock drafts that didn't come true. So, it's mock drafts, baby. Nobody cares. Nobody cares if you're wrong. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back on Friday, and then, of course, no postgame because no postgame show, but we'll have more stuff coming for you next week as well as we get prepared for Hate Week, Volume 1. All right, guys, thank you so much. Kevin Knight at Falcoholic. Kevin, like, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Leave that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. We'll see you next time, guys.